You can't serve a multitude of different customers if you don't have people within those communities challenging your ideas in order to ensure that your product or your service is best suited for that community.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Okay, Lincoln, Mama's going to record this intro. Can you get down?
No, I'm just stay up here.
Okay. All right, can you be quiet? We have a corporate renegade today, and he's quickly becoming one of my favorite humans and one of the most interesting people I have spoken to in a long time. Erik Day is the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Global Small Business Sales at Dell Technologies. That said, he has a lot of other titles, and we dive into them. So here's why Erik is a corporate renegade. He's been with the company. Now, this is a $100 billion company, just kind of level setting here. He's been with this company for over 23 years. And in 2002, he went to Michael Dell, along with a few other folks, and said, I want to create a Pride LGBTQ employee resource group. This is in 2002. That was greenlit, and he has been an advocate for diversity and inclusion for decades. This is clearly life work. And what we discuss is that the life work and the advocacy and passion also has to be balanced with the accountability of his actual job, right? So he has been able to use the company that has his back, who realizes he is a heartbeat of the brand, of that logo, a human behind the brand. He's been able to use that leverage and really combine his career with his passion, purpose, and skill. And it has not been an easy road. We discuss that as well. But as you listen to Erik, you will hear the fulfillment and the desire to continue to drive change after decades and decades. He shares 5 steps in how he approaches situations that are literal, tangible. I think you'll really find value in these. I wrote them down, as I always do, and I've been reflecting on them and applying them in my own life ever since. In this wide-ranging episode, we discuss small businesses, entrepreneurship. Erik has been to more than 25 countries. He oversees the global small business unit for Dell, and that means he has his finger on the pulse when it comes to trends, when it comes to what's happening for entrepreneurs. We discuss women, female entrepreneurs, the progress he has and has not seen in that space. And there's one stat that you might be surprised at. Women are actually opening business twice as fast as men right now. So that alone is creating some pretty interesting shifts and ripple effects for that matter. As many of you know, I'm a huge advocate for Dell Technologies, for the brand, for what they stand for how they operate, and their impact in the world. I'm fortunate, along with the rest of the Renegade team, to have an inside look at their culture, to work with them pretty intimately. And I can tell you this company and their leaders walk the talk. You can learn more about Dell Small Business by following @DellSmallBiz on Instagram and Twitter. And specifically for female founders and entrepreneurs, the Dell Women's Entrepreneur Network, or DWEN as we call it, is running their Dream Tech contest, where Your entrepreneurial story could win up to $40,000 in Dell Tech. Applications are open now. You can head to dwen.com/Amy Jo. That's DWEN.com/Amy Jo. And you can learn about everything and apply. Let me just repeat that real quick. $40,000 in technology. Two things businesses must have to actually just even get started and go: resources, financially, and technology. Well, there you go, $40,000. Imagine what that could unlock. Head to dwen.com/Amy Jo. That's DWEN.com/Amy Jo. I often think about female founders and female leaders. Sometimes we're over-mentored and under-sponsored. And in this case, it's pretty cool to see Dell Technologies really put their money where their mouth is to step up, to sponsor and provide resources for female entrepreneurs. For you or anyone you know who might be eligible, just head to dwen.com/Amy Jo. DWEN.com/Amy Jo. Because why not? If not you, then who? And if not now, then when? Without further ado, here is Erik Day. Erik, welcome to the Why Not Now show. Thank you so much for joining me today. And in the spirit of Why Not Now, let's hop right in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself the ultimate question, why not now? We'll dissect that day, minute, hour, season, and really kind of understand a look under the hood of how you navigated from idea to action.
Well, Amy Jo, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, especially during such an important part of our year, Small Business Month, Small Business Week, and, talking about this passion point that I have. And so I'll make it relative to the audience that is listening and thinking about how I kind of am entrepreneurial in my own sense within Dell. When I first took over the SB business, the small business division at Dell, only in the US. When I first started, I was an executive back in 2015. We were a very strict model. It was, hey, we went ahead and spent a bunch of money on marketing. We did everything we could to bring customers into the model. Many of our listeners probably know the dude, you're getting a Dell days. Well, that's kind of what our model was. We would send out marketing. They would come inbound. Then we would obviously talk to all of our customers that obviously were impacted by some of our marketing. But what I noticed as that time moved on is that the model has changed, but we had all of this access to data. And I kind of looked back in our history and I noticed that we had not a good track record in outbounding. And I know this is somewhat of a boring topic, but like so many times I saw executive after executive kind of give up. It didn't roll. It was like cold calling, dialers, like all this old technology that really didn't work. And so I decided to do it a completely different way. I started to really look at our customer data. I looked at ways to clean that data, ways to deliver customers that have bought from us in the past in a very new, modern way to make our sales agents, or what we call at Dell Technology advisors, much more effective in talking to our customers that might be interested in our technology. It was met with a lot of resistance at Dell, right? Kind of, hey, Erik, you're not staying within your box. This is not what you're supposed to do. And then I said, okay, fine. I'll start running a pilot. I'll start looking at results. And sure enough, it just grew and grew and grew. And then the executive team just couldn't debate that wasn't the right model for us. Fast forward now 6 years, this business globally is well over, it's pushing $3 billion in revenue. And so if you think about, something that started off being really, really small and, hey, you're not outside of your box, ended up becoming one of the fastest growing and most profitable businesses that we have at our company. I think it just kind of goes to show that entrepreneurial spirit, that being able to kind of pivot when people tell you no. It's so really important when you really can see right in front of you, whether it's the data or whether it's your own gut, or hopefully the combination of two, to be able to drive your ambition to do something that's not only good for you, but it's good for the company or the people that you serve.
I love the relevancy and full circle of, you're running small business, you have this entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial mindset, and that's what unlocked this business to thrive and grow within a huge global organization. So it's pretty cool. You said something, Erik, that I want to dive into, and it's so close to my heart, and that is, so you ran a pilot program, right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to get my Petri dish out and we're going to make this safe and mark beta on the side of it, and everybody can just kind of put their hands in the air, and here we are, the $3 billion piece of the company. So when you did that, for those of us listening, I mean, we have so many entrepreneurs listening, female entrepreneurs primarily, and that figure it out muscle just must have kind of clicked in. The resistance is what, we know to expect. What did some of those conversations sound like when you knew, hey, just let me try this, but it wasn't exactly well embraced?
I kind of do this lessons in leadership with folks inside of Dell. And I talk about strategy in 5 different points of view, 5 kind of steps. Step number 1 is figure out what your problem is, right? Understand really what problem that you are trying to solve. In this case, I was trying to figure out how to get to more customers, right? It was a big, huge area of opportunity for us. We knew that Dell Technologies was something that small businesses wanted, but they weren't necessarily being attracted to our same type of go-to-market. So I knew that we had to solve this problem of getting new customers. The second is what we just talked about is data. It doesn't matter if you're starting your small business, if you work for a big business, right? People always talk in this idea of data. So the data clearly talked to us around how many customers were out there, how many of our competitors were doing this type of calling customers to try to get them re-engaged. And the data was also talking to us about how big of the opportunity was. So the data clearly pointed to this idea that we needed to do this. And then the third is this idea of running these pilots, right? Is to kind of test. And so that's what we did. And what we learned in our testing is that the most important thing in order to make this successful was the quality of the data around the customer that we were providing to the sales agent, right? How could we make them as effective as possible by giving them good amounts of information for them to do a little prospecting and then make their first phone calls, so that we can be able to, present to the customer that, hey, we're here to help you. We're here to solve a problem for you. We're not necessarily here to sell you something. If that ends up becoming the outcome, great. But that probably isn't the end. And so ultimately what that ended up doing was generating results that we had not ever seen before. And as you produce those results, that's when you get people's attention, right? It's that idea of your inputs providing the output somebody's looking for, and also being able to almost put out the fires that potentially your audience are looking for. Like, oh, that's going to ruffle this person's feathers, or this is stepping on this business's toes, or, you might be talking to the same customers. If you build your program to show that those, you can anticipate those issues and that they're actually not becoming issues, that also, kind of takes down the temperature, and it allow you to kind of get through some of those objectives. And then ultimately that gets you to, your fourth objective, which is to build a business case. Then you build your business case, and then you start growing your business. So those are kind of why that pilot period is so important, is it because it allows you in a very controlled environment to kind of not only know that your idea works, but it can also bring down those temperatures and show that you're not actually going to create the problems that many people anticipate you might make.
I love those 5 steps, those 5 areas. And what you said too, we talked about this in a team meeting this morning, the quality of the data. It's funny how I think we tend to want to hide behind it, but we also need to make sure that it's, that it's solid. So I'd love to, clearly you have a renegade mentality about you. And I think about, I read a few months ago, Michael Dell's book, Play Nice But Win. And, as I learned more and more about the full journey within Dell And there was a phrase that he says, and he said, we were a merry band of renegades, early days, just figuring it out. Well, in learning more about you, Erik, and reading and hearing from your team, you have been an advocate for diversity and inclusion in many respects of that definition for a very long time. In fact, so you're the global executive chair of the Pride ERG, Employee Resource Group at Dell, right? And it was launched in 2002. Is that correct?
That's right.
That's amazing and so rad. I mean, 20 years ago. So tell me, can we go back there for just a minute and then look at now and tell me what are some of the biggest surprises you've seen in those 20 years and challenges, but also solutions?
I came out of the closet in 1997 when I was a junior in college. And, it was a very, like many stories out there of people that are different, that you can talk a lot about these stories. And mine was no different. And it was a pretty hard time, but I got through it pretty well. And by the time I got to Dell, I kind of went through all those emotions. And again, I was a bit of a renegade. As you said, I love that term. I appreciate it. It's kind of a compliment.
Oh yeah, for sure it is.
But when I started at Dell, I had a choice to make, right? It was the late 90s, early 2000s, being out in technology really wasn't kind of, very accepted. And, but Dell provided me this amazing career opportunity. I was doing really well. I loved what I did. And I didn't want to go back in the closet. I didn't want to be somebody who I wasn't. So this group of 5 of us, were asked to kind of put together this proposal to go in front of Michael and the ELT at the time and pitch this idea of an employee resource group for the LGBTQ community. And it actually was quite natural because I had already made the decisions and went through the emotions around, I'm just going to be who I am. I'm just going to, if people talk about what they did on the weekend, I'm going to talk about what I did on the weekend. If people talk about their partner, I'm going to talk about my partner. I was going to force equity by just living. And it went so well. It got launched. We're now 20 years later. We're 30 chapters, 20 different countries, over 5,000 members of both community members and allies and friends. And it's an amazing network of people. But the biggest thing and the biggest challenge that we face is how do we ensure that every employee of our company can feel that way? And the advice I give to people is the compliment I have gotten. It's a bit of a backwards compliment, but it's still a compliment to me nevertheless. And they say, Erik, when I first talked to you, you made me super uncomfortable. But it was only because I had never met anybody like you. But after talking to you once or twice, I just realized that it was just part of life, and it made me super comfortable. And it's made me a better leader. It's made me a better manager. Made me better with my peer group because I can better understand when people work with me that are different from me. And I think that's the journey that a lot of us are on is how do we break down the bias? How do we just realize that difference is good for business? And I think this is kind of what my advocacy has led to in talking about this amazing intersection of companies being successful because they mirror the customers they want to serve. You can't serve a multitude of different customers if you don't have people within those communities challenging your ideas in order to ensure that your product or your service is best suited for that community. And I think that's where the ERGs are evolving and being such an amazing resource, not only for the employees themselves, but for the company's strategy. And I think that as we talk about small businesses and what small businesses are doing, I really challenge our founders and our entrepreneurs to remember when they're building their teams to make sure that they look like your customers, not look like you. Because that's going to challenge them to actually push back on the status quo, push back on what their blinder of their idea might be, and to make their idea even more well-rounded and balanced so that they can be as successful as possible.
I want to double click into a couple things that you just said. First of all, you said, I was just going to force equity by living, like being who you were. And that right there, just first of all, to have the vision that was your route at the age you must have been. You must have been, what, like 15 or something?
I wish. 20 something.
But to have that, at that stage in your career, and then also you look at where we are now with so many dynamics in the workplace and options and talent, and with your colleague, Liz Matthews, Senior VP of Global Brand, some of the things she's even doing to help her team show up more fully as themselves. One of the things we're seeing is, okay, that's good for everyone, right? That's good for business. Like you said, diversity of thought and minds and mirroring that demographic or psychographic or attitudinal. But we're going to reach and resonate with more like-minded, like-hearted humans. But it's great for talent attraction. It's great for talent retention. It's just great for joy and fulfillment. Talk about a strategy, a business strategy that's good for humanity. Do you feel like we're seeing some pretty big spikes and adoption of this across business in general? If you were to look across the landscape, Dell's a huge, huge company. It's pretty progressive. Is this a trend that's sticking and growing?
We can't solve everything. I don't know what everybody's strategy is, but what I hear a lot is I'm becoming a bit of an anomaly, that the fact that I've been at the company for 23 years, like what keeps you at your company for that long, right? Because that's not known. That's not done very often anymore. Mm-hmm. And what I tell people is that when you find a place where you can be truly accepted for who you are, and you can give your best of who you are every day, it benefits everyone. And I truly believe the trend is that CEOs, founders, large organizations across this world are realizing is that the better your employees feel when they're doing the work, the better the work is. The better the work is, the more competitive that you are in the market that you service. And I think Michael and the leadership team really do appreciate that. And over the last few years, I have seen just such an amazing shift of the focus that this leadership team has in understanding different communities and listening to their voices and understanding what needs to change because of that, whether it's the change in the language that we do our training in, whether it is the way that we do coding, whether it's the way that we do, how do we include all of these different voices and all of those things that we do? And I think that's really impressive, because companies need to understand that in order to be the best in your field, the best have to want to work for you. In order to be the best you are in your field, all types of customers have to buy from you. And if you are not seen as an inclusive, equitable leader in your field, you're not going to win, right? And I think at the root of it all, you not only want to build a company that's winning, but you want to build a company that you're proud of. And something that I've always been impressed with Michael and the entire leadership team is our dedication and commitment to our culture code. And it's why I stay, right? I'm challenged in my work. I'm excited about practically the megaphone they give me to talk about how important this issue is. And I love the people I work with. And when I started at Dell, I knew nothing about technology. I mean, you had to pay me to take a computer science class when I was an undergrad. I'm a psychology major, for crying out loud. But here I am running a massive technology business. And I learned how to be a technologist because I loved the culture that I worked for. And I think as this world changes and the economy changes and technology becomes a much bigger thing, we want to get people excited about technology, because we want to encourage more people like me to want to work for our company. And I think those small businesses and entrepreneurs and founders out there that are listening to this, they should be thinking about that as they think about building their team.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us. I love how, you said Dell has basically given you a megaphone for this. And when I look at this logo now and it pops up in my pathway, I think of you. I think of the humans behind the brand, right? It's very smart on so many levels, but it's so genuine. You can't fake that. So we talk a lot about the humans are the heartbeat of the brand, and it's not always easy to do when you run an organization of that size, but you're doing it. Let's switch gears for a moment. So I'm going on it'll be soon 14 entrepreneur. And it has been such an interesting ride and so exciting. I would never change anything or trade it for anything, but I did not plan to set out on this path of entrepreneurship. You have an awesome organization within Dell, the Dell Women's Entrepreneur Network. And Dwen is doing some incredible things, including giving away, $40,000 plus worth of technology. So we'll be talking more about that. And make sure you check the links below too. But what have you seen, given the role that you play and the optics? I mean, you've been to 25 countries and 5 continents. Like, you are global and you see it all. Small businesses, female entrepreneurship. What are some of the top trends and areas of progress as well as need that you're seeing?
I don't think this is a global statistic, but I think it's definitely a US statistic. Women are just opening up businesses and starting businesses almost twice as fast as men at this point. And you look at college and university admissions, they're highly scaling towards women. And when trends start like that in your own country, you look at other countries and you start seeing similar trends. Now, we all know that when we think about entrepreneurship, or at least I do, there are 2 critical things that always come to mind for me: access to capital and access to technology. And without those 2 things, there is no business. And so I believe that based on the data that I have seen, the conversations that I've had, the women I have talked to, there has not been as much access to capital, right? It has definitely been part of our markets that has been less equitable to our female population than it has been to the male population. And the second is technology. Not saying that there aren't women out there that love technology, but technology is something that has been very, very widely seen as more of a male-dominated field, et cetera. It hasn't been as accessible or approachable, I'd probably say, to the female population. And we have to change that, right? Our job as Dell Technologies is to remind people that we build technology for everyone. And data doesn't care about your sex or your gender identity or anything like that. But it's needed in order to start a business. And being able to do things with your data is even more important in a small business, because that's what drives your next best action. And if you think about a business as you grow it, that's exactly what you're always focusing on. What's my next biggest client? What's my next biggest product? All of the data is going to show you and lead you to some of those answers. But if you don't have a really good plan about how you actually take in that data and look at that data and mine that data and analyze that data, it's going to be really hard for you to compete with those in your area. And so we need to figure out cool ways to make that information accessible to people that have not seen technology as approachable for a long, long time. And programs like the Dell Women's Entrepreneur Network do that. And I think we have a huge role to play, and not only being like, okay, this is what a server does and blah, 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 boring. It's more around, how does technology enable you to do better business? I'll never forget this one Dwen Summit that I spoke about technology and the importance of technology, and ultimately how turning yourself into a technology company is what's going to make you successful. And the women would just fly out of there and say, Erik, I'm turning around and becoming a technology company today. And they sold women's lingerie or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, perfect. That's exactly what you need to do. It doesn't matter what widget or what piece of clothing or what, whatever it is you're selling, what service you're providing. If you don't have a great e-commerce platform, great way to capture data, and being able to you're not going to be able to keep up in today's world. And we're hoping to change that. And we want to change it based on the way that we see the dynamics and the demographics of the business community changing at a very, very fast rate.
It's so interesting how it really is blocking and tackling it, right? Like, you must absolutely have these nuts and bolts in place. And and the enabling. And I just spoke at the Women's Presidents Organization, the global conference. And here you have these women, I think collectively they're generating $22 billion annually. And someone made a comment and they said, women, sometimes we're over-mentored and under-sponsored. And I loved that because it was like, yep, absolutely. With Dwen, with the Dell Women's Entrepreneurship Network, providing these and unlocking some of this technology, that is a form of sponsorship, right? We're not just offering advice, we're actually providing, and we meaning I'm consider myself a part of your team and a partner. But I'd love to get your thoughts, and you don't have to, you don't have to provide a personal opinion, but just as a business leader in this area, we've seen now since 2018, it's been pretty flat, about 2% of VC money goes to women. And why? I mean, I get and I see, but what are some of the big levers we need to pull, do you think?
Yeah, it's so funny. International Women's Day this year, the term, and I don't mean to get super cliche, but the theme of International Women's Day this year was break the bias. It's all bias related, right? And listen, I know some amazing leaders of VC firms and hedge funds and et cetera. I don't think people purposely become biased, right? I don't think people purposely are prejudiced. Like I think it's learned and developed. We did this amazing activity in our unconscious bias training at Dell. Mm-hmm. And we have people write down their name of their best friend, their name of their favorite family member, the name of their favorite, coworker, the name of their favorite customer. I think there's one more. And we say, hey, look at that list. Raise your hand if a majority of these people look just like you. Whole room raise their hand. And they're like, and you just see the light bulbs go off, right? In a lot of ways, bias is learned, right? It's built within your cultural upbringing, and it's going to take massive allyship in order to break all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And, I got to interview Glennon Doyle a couple of years ago, and I'm sure you have probably interviewed her.
She's been on the podcast as well. She's one of your fellow guests.
I am a huge I'm a huge super fan. And I asked her about allyship, and I said, Glennon, I said, a lot of these things, when you talk about how you were kind of accepted or not accepted into the LGBTQ community, it almost seemed like there was an allyship issue within our own community. And she goes, Erik, very, very smart. It was actually about allyship and how within our own communities but across the board, it's not only about sponsorship, it's about allyship. I'm like, how do I get to have my experience and not be there for other people that are experiencing the same thing I am, right? How do I how do I get past my own self goals and learn that if I actually expanded that out and actually learn from people that are different from me, that need my allyship, that I actually get better, that actually there ends up becoming more opportunity for me because I expand my sphere of influence, not shrink it. This is how we change the VC stuff, is that where do we have allyship in that VC community? Why aren't we holding them accountable to changing, right? Why can't we get them the training and the influence that they need in order to be able to change the way that they think about diversifying their own portfolios, right? Because guess what? It's going to end up being failure for them at one point, because women are going to figure this out and they are going to get the funding they need from wherever they're going to need it because they're incredibly resilient. They're starting businesses more than men. You see where the math is going, right? The math is not going in their favor.
And research shows they're good for the bottom line, right? At the C-level, at the board level, for conflict, and litigious things. They're good for profit, but also, so agreed. There's a business case among that.
And the business cases are hard and they don't like that, right? Like financial people want dollars and cents and they want it black and white and all this other stuff. But, another conversation I've had recently at a D&I conference was about empathetic leadership. Right? We talked a lot about inclusivity, but we need to talk about empathetic leadership. The reason that I think women are really changing the bottom line is because they bring a level of empathy and a way to kind of think about problems in a 360 view that have not normally seen. Back in the day, it was all about this decision needs to be made. We need to go from A to B to C, and that's how we're going to do it. It's a very linear way to think about leadership and to think about problem solving. But what we're seeing is that when you are more empathetic to the things that are happening, but you also have to balance that with accountability, right? It's not either or. It's not empathy or accountability. It's both. And then you think about problems from a 360 view. Women are really bringing that into the workplace at a much faster rate. And I think that's the reason why women are good for the bottom line. And as you think about this next generation of millennials and Gen Z that are coming into the workplace, empathetic and inclusive leadership and, thinking about problems in 360 views is table stakes, right? The leadership spectrum is completely changing. And if you want to retain top talent, if you want to keep evolving top talent, these are going to be table stakes that our companies are going to have. So bringing it in now and developing them and sponsoring them is really important. And it doesn't matter what size your business is. These rules apply to the smallest of businesses and to the biggest of businesses.
I love this. I love what you just said about empathetic leadership and accountability. I think that we just love to pendulum swing sometimes. And it's always an and. It's very rarely an or, right? Just looking at my career path, historically, most of my mentors have been men. Growing up in sports and entertainment and technology, that's just a lot of male leaders that I was around. And I've seen this influx, though, over the last, I'd say 7 years. I now have female mentors, too. And I'm, of course, it's the career love of my life to mentor women. But I think, and what I appreciate, Erik, about you is that I think one of the bigger catalysts and accelerators of this, race toward, let's call it equality and diverse minds around the table is men speaking up and men leading too. And that's what's so exciting for me to see is my elevators are sent down from men, and you get in and you go up and you just send them back down to whoever you can. And I appreciate more men actually having a stance and taking some action too, because that's where the power and the influence and the money resides. So that's important.
Well, and I think people need to get ready that the world is not as binary anymore as it was before, and it's just going to get less binary. And I think that really scares some people. But the fact of the matter is that it's coming, and you're not going to be able to change it. And so if you don't figure out how to drive some of this hybrid type of thinking, then I think that you risk the ability to really connect with people that are just not in one bucket or the other, or go backwards and forwards. And I really believe that company success is in the power of having people believe that they can accomplish anything. And we have to be able to give them the leadership and belief that they can do it. And I appreciate what you said about accountability, because I work on myself all the time, and sometimes I'm too accountable, and I ask my people to say, hey, hold me accountable, so that I don't go one way or the other. And then I always balance it with reminding people, of the care I have for them, and that I want them to be successful. And a lot of my accountability comes from them wanting more for themselves. And that's going to help them not only in their work, in their professional life, but it should help them in their personal life as well. There's such a responsibility we have as leaders. And entrepreneurs and founders are big time leaders as well. So these are just things that we have to think about.
So let's continue with that and kind of start to wrap up here. But what's one lesson you find yourself learning over and over, Erik?
I think the lesson that I keep learning over and over is to balance. Is to be reminded that people always want to know that you're there for them and you care about them and things. I just recently had a one-on-one, and in that one-on-one, it was with a more junior person in my organization, and they were very self-aware about what they wanted to work on. And I remembered a couple of different examples, and I reminded them of what they needed to work on. But I also wanted to remind myself that, hey, they're super really good at what they do. I think we can get them to where they want to go for their career, et cetera. And about an hour later, their leader came into my office and said, hey, this person, felt really bad. They're very emotional about what you told them. And it reminded me that a lot of people always hold on to the opportunities and not the strengths. And I think what I keep reminding myself of is that it's always super important that when you're trying to give people criticism, it's also really important to lift them up as well. And when you leave a conversation like that, it's really important that they remember the constructive criticism on ways to continue to be successful in what they're really, really good at. That one feeds the other. And so, yeah, even the other day, and again, it doesn't matter who I'm leading or mentoring, I'm always learning. And it was a big learning lesson for me on how could I have changed my message around? Because I don't want anybody to come into a conversation with me and ever feel like I don't appreciate the work that they do. So it's always like, how do you change your messaging around? How do you make sure that you're leading with optimism? How are you always lifting people up at the same time, making sure that they understand where they have room to grow? And how do you make that a really positive experience so that they can continue to shine?
I love that example. Thank you for sharing like a tangible example that we can all relate to in some way. What keeps you up at night?
Right now, I mean, it's a lot, I got to tell you. And relative to this conversation, what keeps me up at night is probably the labor shortage in underserved communities to give them the training that they need in order for us to be able to fill the something like 2 million tech jobs that we've got open in this region. I kind of wonder if I'm doing enough to encourage others. That's why I take the time and work extra hours to do podcasts like yours to talk about this, because it's such a huge responsibility for every leader to really think about how amazing the future can be around a lot of this major innovation. But in order to make those innovations continue to work, you've got to have people to run them and update them and make them work. And it's clear based on what's going on in this country and the world around labor that we are not doing enough. Mm-hmm. And it's time for us to work together to figure out making sure that we have the resources there to get other communities what they need in order to be able to be successful in this kind of new age of technology and innovation. And so, yeah, that's probably what keeps me up at night the most.
It's amazing how it all does have tentacles back to technology, right? There's just such a heartbeat with this. It really is, right?
This and this thing on my desk, and it's all over me.
And sometimes it's amazing how this also becomes the freedom card, so I can escape my busy, loud household and go sit in the driveway in my car office and just hide out there. And so let's wrap it up here. And I have a scenario. Let's put you back 2002. You're standing in front of, or wherever and however you pitched this new idea at Dell. And I think what's cool is talk about Renegade, true and true. So as you're standing there and you're literally getting ready to pitch Michael Dell with this concept and this new employee resource group, if you could go back and give yourself some advice, or just say something, it doesn't have to be advice, just say something right before you were able to deliver your value prop, what would you say?
I guess I would almost say what I'm saying to myself now, is to think about what this company is going to be like 20 years from now, and how important this will be for the story of any company that wants to survive in a very changing world. And the funny thing is that I didn't have to get the advice, which is the reason why I think I'm so thankful to still be working at Dell Technologies, because as technology has evolved, as we have continued to be a big presence in this field, even though many of our competitors across the last 20 years have fallen away, I think the reason that we have always been able to innovate and evolve and continue to stay ahead of the competition is because our people and our culture, our ethics, our ability to be really a place where people could be their best, I think has allowed us to stay ahead. It goes back to your quote about Michael Dell saying, "Hey, I'm a company of renegades." In order to be a renegade, you have to be able to be true to who you are. And again, the biggest advice that I can give to those listening to this is, as you're building your company, as you're building your team, be thinking about that. Be thinking about really representing who you want to be and who you want to sell to and who your customers are, and ensure that your team is reflective of that, because that will be a true testament to your success.
Well, it's very clear. Innovation is in your DNA, and that means adversity is going to be along the way the entire ride, because we can't innovate without adversity, and it takes a lot of bravery, Erik. So I'm grateful that you're a renegade here in my hometown of Austin. But thank you for doing the important work and leading, and for a long time, and continuing to revisit and look at how we can make a dent. So. Appreciate you, and thank you for sharing your time and wisdom.
Amy Jo, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for having these important conversations. The work you're doing is really helpful and helping a lot of people. So thank you for what you do as well.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?